Butterflies are people who, you've got a split second while at a buying temperature to actually capture their attention and get them to finish the transaction. The classic example of that is on Amazon.com when they're trying to upsell you on the, users also bought this. That's a very short time window where you're actually sensitive to that message. So it's not just about revenue. It's also about it's not just about sales on the website on the day. It's also about the propensity of the users to come back to your site. Now this is an interesting one. This is from Strangely on a site that they monitored. The three lines are different delays. So there's a baseline, then they did a 500 milliseconds delay and a 1000 milliseconds delay. And then what they did was they plotted the percentage of visitors that came back. And they noticed that when they delayed it, the percentage of visitors that came back was greater. But interestingly enough, after they stopped the experiment, it was still another 6 weeks, and these lines still haven't converged. In other words, the effects are long term. So you can give someone a bad experience, and they'll remember that for weeks and weeks to come, and it'll affect their, maybe not consciously, almost certainly not consciously, but it will affect them and their behaviour in future. Now this is an interesting study from Walmart, and this was a revolutionary study when it came out 2.5 years ago. This was published in the San Francisco Web Performance Meetup. And this shows the blue is the histogram, showing how many page loads are in each bucket category. And obviously there's a long tail, because there's a high greater than 15, so there's a lot of slower ones as well. And then this is the conversion rate, showing you that if you can deliver a page in 0 to 1 seconds, you're going to get a much higher conversion than if it takes longer. And the longer it takes, the less and less you convert. In fact, by here, you've sort of hit the poverty line where, there's, you may as well not bother almost.
So Ben, what is a conversion?
Oh, okay, good question. A conversion is when someone actually completes a transaction and spends money on your website.
Okay.
So if you're, Amazon, it's when you buy a book.
Okay.
Yeah. So conversion is usually expressed as a percentage, and a good conversion rate for a website is anything more than 3%.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of for e-commerce merchants. If you're down under 1%, then you're not very healthy, depending on the category and the price. The average cart size and a few things like that.
Now I notice there's no scale on there, so we don't know what the actual conversion rates are. But
yeah, that's right. Because
so
conversion.
I don't see the relative.
Yeah, conversion rate is a very sensitive metric, and
Right.
they came out and put their name to it.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you some examples which have got scales, but I'm not going to tell you where they're from.
Okay. So you get one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we talked earlier about bounce rate, or I talked about bounce rate, and a few people nodded. Bounce rate is one of those metrics, like conversion, that measures user engagement in your site. If everyone who comes to your site stays and looks around and does more than one page on there, then your bounce rate is 0. If everyone comes to your site and leaves straight away, then you've got 100% bounce rate. Now it's a generally accepted. The guy who wrote Google's book on web analytics reckons it's a very good, robust measure of user engagement. So this is what it looks like for one of our customers. This stuff here is kind of junk. That's when people get served error pages, or when they go and look at a page and they go back straight away. All the really fast sites will get logged as a bounce. So this is kind of junk. Here, notice it's kind of the opposite shape it's almost the opposite shape to the conversion graph from Walmart. But this customer found they had a sweet spot of about 2.1 seconds, and the bounce rate there was 16-17%. By the time you get up to 8 seconds, you've lost 50% of your traffic. Now, if you're paying for search engine marketing, if you're paying for AdWords and anything like that, then you're literally, pouring money away because you're driving people away from actually converting. Now, this is interesting, but what about if we turn it up the other way and we'll talk about a practical example? So this retailer that it came from had a $10 million turnover with a base bounce rate of 25% and a median load time of 4.2 seconds. So we're talking about so $10 million was what they got, was their revenue. And this curve is, that's not actual data. I mean, that curve is taken from the bounce rate. And the curve suggests that if we assume that the bounce rate correlates with revenue, inversely correlates with revenue, 1 second improvement in load time means revenue will increase to 11.3. So from 4.2 to 3.2, we go up to 11.3. So that's 1 second means revenue of $1.3 million. And that's a small e-commerce retailer. That's $1 million, 10 million in turnover. Then if you look at the profit side of things, assuming they've got a gross profit of 30% and fixed costs of 2 million. So this is kind of the business calculations that we often get into. 1 second improvement in load time takes profit up 35%. So a 35% improvement in profit just by improving the response time by 1 second. So these are the sort of results that we've seen. And that's what, $360,000, which is quite a chunk of change. All right. So can I just get a time check? 6:05. Okay, so another 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yeah.
Yep. I'm always fascinated, and this is no insult to the members of the construction industry, because I'm sure like any other industry that they're under commercial pressure. So there's got to be a good reason for this phenomenon. But who has driven past construction workers and seen a whole bunch of people standing around? Yeah, okay. So this is a photo showing 3 guys working and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people standing around. What I want to talk about briefly is just, we've talked about e-commerce, but I've done a lot of work on application performance in the corporate enterprise context, where you're dealing with, you're not dealing with revenue and you're not dealing with conversions, you're really just dealing with people's time. So here's an example of people's time being wasted. Now these are pretty simple calculations, you could do them yourselves if you haven't already done them. Slowcorp has 10,000 employees, average salary 50,000, 40% loading on that for incidentals. Pretty conservative assumptions. Each user interacts with the corporate application on average once per hour. Now there's many users who will do that once per minute, maybe 10 times per minute. And the average response time for a user transaction when interacting with a corporate application is 10 seconds. Even if they're doing it all that whole hour and only one, everything else is instantaneous, only one takes 10 seconds. Well, let's look at what that looks like. So the lost productivity is on average 10 seconds per hour per employee, which is 0.28% of each working hour. So if you've got 10,000 employees, that translates to an equivalent full-time strike force of 28 highly qualified, motivated and focused employees whose sole mission is to do nothing. $1.96 million of staff effort. So this is, this is just the hard numbers. What we're going to get into is the rubbery figures. This slide I didn't actually get around to finishing. I looked at, we do a bit of work on user experience, UX, and looking at what's important to users. And according to some studies anyway, response time is actually the most important thing. It matters a lot more than Microsoft's paperclippy thing, which some will remember from a few years back. This is the result. Oh, this is a fascinating study. Yeah, this was 4 companies. There was like Ryanair, Tesco, Webjet, and another company that they artificially delayed by half a second the response times on these, and then got a bunch of users to come in and test them. And they did some hard numbers, like they put the brain helmets on and they did a bunch of stuff. But these are just the subjective stuff. So it's not entirely clear cut as you'd expect. It's only half a second, so that you get some, even in the normal speed ones, you get a bit of slow, you get a bit of busy and confusing. But by and large, you get easy to use, and over here you get slow, hard to navigate. You see, you get some stuff like pleasant, but you get sluggish, clunky, tacky, and a bunch of other things. So some of these things are not actually about the application itself. They're not about the response time of the application itself. And one of the other things that came out of this study was that people who had a slow experience of the merchant actually trusted them less and thought less of them. And this is, it's not, I mean, it just crosses over, right? You have and what it is, it's actually Pavlovian, what's called Pavlovian conditioning or classical conditioning. It's the phenomenon behind the old advertising formula of sex, confusion, insert product. Namely, you create a stimulus that has an emotional effect, and then you put in the thing you want to paint it with, and the brain doesn't know the difference. So that's why we think colours are sexy, or some of us think some colours are sexy.
It's no therapy.
Yeah. Exactly. So again, this is actually a CA study. So thank you, CA, from 2009, where they did a similar thing. They slowed things down and they monitored your what's the skin conductance, which basically measures the
impedance.
Yeah, the impedance. That's right, exactly right. Which measures the sympathetic nervous system activity, which measures how stressed you are. Because when you're stressed, you sweat, and that fills up the pores and it conducts more. And you can measure this on a scale of 50 milliseconds, the difference that you get. So they slowed it down, and they noticed that, and this is also, they also used monitoring the brainwaves, so the alpha, theta, beta brainwaves. Alpha is when you're in your flow state, deep concentration. Beta is when you're stressed out. Theta is when you're asleep, and delta is when you're dreaming. So slow websites mean you have a lot less alpha. 78% of users say they felt stress or anger when using a slow website. I'll probably skip that. Oh yeah, this stuff. Have I got another couple of minutes? Yeah. This is really the soft stuff that I'm fascinated with, and there's not enough data out there. I can't get conclusive stuff. But my presumption, my thinking is, if you're doing, when you're working, you've got really important tasks and less important tasks. If you are interrupted from your really important tasks and go to your less important tasks, the overall effect on the amount of important work you get done in the day is going to be, it's going to take a hit. And for an entire organisation, having everyone working on the wrong tasks because their computer's slow and they've been multitasking, it's got to be, a really significant. It's soft, it's rubbery, but it's there. So self-interruptions they've found. They've looked at multitasking. They've found that self-interruptions are 50%. After an interruption, workers are predisposed to choose the easiest tasks to work on, which are, generally speaking, the least productive. The one that's most productive is that one you've been putting off all day because you know you've got to do it and it's hard. And once you start on an easy task, there's a significant barrier to context switching back to the original task. And this is, I'd love to be able to do a master's thesis on this or something, but the fact that if there's a slow application, you're going to context switch to an easier task, you're going to get stuck on that one, and you're not going to get back to your most important work. What impact is that going to have on an organisation? We don't know, but we can take a fairly educated guess. In terms of the cost of interruptions and the cost of stress, there's some big numbers there. 650 billion a year related to the lack of job performance and creativity due to distractions. World Health Organization reckons that stress costs American businesses $300 billion a year. In Australia, it's $30 billion a year. And slow applications has been shown to cause stress by the neurological monitoring. I'll skip that one. So the conclusion really is slow sites have negative impacts on revenue, brand perception and loyalty. Slow apps waste a significant amount of time, and we can calculate that. But beyond the slow time wastage, slow apps cause stress, anxiety and frustration, and we're yet beginning to actually understand what that means to productivity and other costs in the enterprise. So anyway, that's my contribution for today. I hope you found some interest in there.
Absolutely. Very good.
Thank you.
Questions?
In fact, you've hit a very good point because we in C